Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is, wherever you are. Welcome to today's Grey Market Blast. It is Monday, the 14th of July. How we're already halfway through July, nobody knows. You join myself and the glamorous with a capital G, Angie Setzer, where Angie will be giving us a rapid roundup of the latest pricing flows and market moving news in agricultural markets. But before she does, and so I don't get a spanking, I'll get the legals out the way. Nothing discussed on the Spaces session constitutes trading or investment advice or infers any kind of endorsement by PIQ, myself, Ryan Paisley, or indeed the wonderful, the glamorous Angie Setzer. Angie, how are you, my love?
Woohoo! It's Monday, in the summer. Like, I always feel like I get drugged back into the office on Monday in the summer. I don't know if you feel that way, but
No, absolutely. I
yeah.
also don't really know where the weekend went this
Yeah,
weekend. It blinked and I missed it.
Right. And then you said it's the 14th of the month and I basically fell over. So yeah, I don't like it. We are, neck deep in wheat harvest here. Wheat harvest, if you emphasize the H, as you should. Cool whip. But yeah, we're in the middle of wheat harvest here. And so the weekend was partially, I act like I'm out in the combine. I'm not. I just answered a couple phone calls, but what was me, right? Anyway, happy Monday. Few things that we're working through today, or a few things that we've got, to cover. Just a handful, minor things, nothing big.
Nothing really happened.
Nothing happened. We'll start with the USDA numbers, obviously, because we had that update there Friday morning. And if you listened into my Twitter spaces, you got to experience the funness that is me trying to keep it together as I want to just flip out. Because we had a pretty bullish report, you could say. I had said that ahead of that number there Friday morning that I felt like some traders had missed the adjustment lower in the harvested acreage number, and were therefore going to be a bit surprised by the production figure in corn coming in lower than what they had anticipated. And that was the case. We did see the production number come in about 115 million bushels lower than what traders were anticipating. We did see old crop carry out reduced a bit more than what traders were anticipating as well. And that brought new crop ending stocks in about 60 million bushels lower than what traders were expecting. World ending stocks, I think that was the biggest thing, and one of the things that we have to be paying the most attention to here, just simply because we continue to see this sort of dwindling of world surplus, world carryover. Was world ending stocks came in 200 million bushels lower than what traders were anticipating, which is a pretty spicy meatball. All of this without having China really actively involved in this market. And so it's just something to be paying attention to. I do feel like, we got a bit of a negative reaction to the number because we've had this sort of same old, idea. Well, if the yield's 185 bushels the acre, okay, like let's pump the brakes here. We have a record high amount of harvested acreage area. We've had, we've had a hefty rainfall, but we've actually had in some instances, and people will be like, well, there's no such thing as too much rain. There is when you get 8 inches in 2 weeks. Like there is when you get a tremendous surplus and you start to have, nutrient, leaching and some of these other things. I'm not an agronomist, but I have been, working with farmers long enough to know, just all of the hurdles that the crop has to jump through. And I think we need to, like I said, pump the brakes. I saw someone basically post last week or say something last week that would have been the equivalent of a 190 plus bushel to the acre corn yield number. And I'm like, all right, well, we've hit max silliness at this point. And that's kind of what you need to see. But we did get this number out on Friday that was much below what traders were expecting. We have a carry out that's projected to be a 1.66 billion bushels, which is really tight, a stocks to use ratio that is historically tight as well with what is projected to be a record yield. And so we've got to be careful there. Soybeans were kind of a nothing burger. There wasn't really anything big or surprising in those numbers. Old crop carry out was left unchanged. Traders were expecting a little bit of an increase there, but new crop carry out was increased by the amount that traders had expected old crop to be raised, it was raised 15 million bushels, so slightly more than that. Basically new crop bean carry out came in around 310 million bushels. You did see the USDA make a pretty substantial cut to the export projection for new crop, which is surprising to me, but I also think it's an indication, or they are responding to the slow pace, to China's early season purchases. And so that story is now left, that crutch that you'll have analysts kind of be like, well, exports might be overstated. You're right. The USDA did make a pretty substantial adjustment lower in that regard. They did increased crush because of the biofuels, the RVOs, kind of as expected. And so now we'll just have to see what the weather does here as we move into August, simply because we are projecting a record yield in soybeans as well. Wheat carryout came in slightly lower than what traders were expecting. World wheat numbers came in slightly lower than what traders were expecting. Soybeans in line. So overall, from the USDA number, really, it just kind of continues to paint the picture of a ridiculously tight corn supply with a very lofty supply number, or ridiculously tight carryout, you could say. Like if we were to see any of the shine come off as we move forward, things could get pretty tight. Now, yes, we have a big crop out of Brazil, and we have less than stellar Chinese demand, but these things are all factored into the balance sheet at this point. And so I think that was kind of important, and that's really the first point there. So any questions on the number? Did you see anything or anyone comment on anything that had you like scratching your head? It's pretty
No,
straightforward.
yeah, none from me. None from me,
Okay.
to be
I was going
honest.
to say it's supply and it's demand, our two favorite things.
Yeah,
But,
exactly. Makes the world go
it
round.
really does sometimes, unless you just completely become unhinged, I guess. I don't know. But, second thing is, tariffs, trade war things. Basically, we're trade warring with friends at this point. We did see Canada, the tariff announcement on Canada, come in at 35%. And then over the weekend here, the EU and Mexico both got a 30% announcement. And so I think a lot of people were a little nervous that you would see an immediate knee-jerk sort of reaction, that the EU would be like, all right, well, that $100 billion
Yeah.
in products, we're going to tariff back right away, right now, tomorrow. In Mexico, we're a little nervous about what that would look like. I would say basically Mexico, you're going to see the USMCA exemption apply. Have you seen anything on that? I
Ah,
mean, am I...
I've not, but that would be my way of thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, if that's what we're doing with Canada, I don't understand why we wouldn't do it with
Canada?
our friends to the south. Yes, Canada. That's its 51st state name when it becomes a,
Ah, got you,
yeah,
got you, got you.
so,
Good recovery.
yeah. But yeah, because that's what we're doing with Canada over here. So I would imagine Mexico's going to be the same. You did see Scheinbaum basically today be like, yes, but, Trump is very smart and he is very, he knows what he's doing. We'll go ahead and resolve this pretty well, was kind of like the Mexico response. The EU did say that they're going to give it until August 1st. They think that they can reach a deal. And so we're going to escalate to de-escalate, and then we solve a problem, right? Like that's basically, I
Well,
kind of
yeah,
think that's where we're at.
that definitely seems to be, I hate to use the word, and I'm doing air quotes that no one can see, good for me,
Right.
the vibe.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, one thing that I'd really be focused on is how the EU are handling this in terms of von der Leyen, Merz, obviously the German premier, and Macron, the French president, because we've already seen, and well, Meloni as well, actually, we've already seen like the leaders of the powerhouses of Europe, or the EU, should I say, we voted out. We've already seen, especially Merz, be a bit critical of the EU's handling of negotiations, saying that they should focus on specific areas. If you hear Germany say specific areas, they mean the auto
Yes,
sector.
Otto.
To be
Yep.
clear about that. So it'd be interesting to see if, as this, now we've got this new deadline, August 1st,
It's
if
been
we
the
see any,
same deadline all along, Ryan. I don't know why you're
yeah,
confused by this.
no, absolutely, absolutely.
Don't
But
you love that?
it'd be really interesting to see if we see any fractures develop between, like public fractures
Hmm.
develop between the
In
likes
the
of
EU.
Macron,
Yeah.
Merz, and von der Leyen. Because if that happens, then you got to think, if the Trump administration had any sense, that they would then apply the pressure, because they know they can squeeze the EU members against each other, and that they'll do the hard work for them.
Yeah.
But it's definitely one to keep an eye on.
I feel like
Again,
that's what they're doing at this
yeah,
point, is like,
absolutely. Yeah, I think so.
he's
I
already
think so.
started. And you see Macron today be like, well, we just need to spend more on defense. Okay, well, where does that come from? How does that,
Yeah,
what is
that's so
that
easy when you say it
doing?
like that.
That's what, and then, kind of, I don't want to skip over into NATO and Russia and some of these other things, but it is part of what you're seeing too, with
Yeah.
members of NATO buying weapons to deliver to Ukraine. And we'll talk about that in the next bullet point. But that's also a guise, if you will. We played Scrabble this weekend, so now I get to feel like I have words in my brain I hadn't used in a minute. But it's a way to kind of reduce that trade deficit as well. It's two birds, one stone sort of thing. We did see just recently here in the last like 3 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever, 2 minutes apparently, Brazil is going to request the US to lower tariffs to 30%, which is kind of interesting. Just simply because, 30% seems like a win in this instance, apparently. Maybe they're just asking for it in the meantime. but we were talking about it over the weekend, Carl and I, because we do import a lot of like ground beef and coffee and some of these other things from Brazil.
You mean the US, right?
Yes,
Just
the
not just
U.S.
your
Yeah.
household.
Yeah. We don't, we import it from across the road, the beef. The coffee, I don't know where it comes from. Minor. The local grocery store. Groceries is a cool word too, by the way. But anyway, we import a lot of that. And so it'll be interesting to see because 50% is basically embargo rate. Like if you're already paying $8 a pound for ground beef at the store, like you don't really have the ability to be paying $12 a pound at the, you know what I mean? Like so it'll be
Yeah.
something to watch. And I'm not saying that it necessarily lands in the grocery store shelves. Like don't get me wrong. I think it ends up mostly in fast food and stuff, but we'll be watching to see what that looks like and how quickly that is resolved. Simply because we are seeing, it just, we got to figure out what it looks like. We are seeing a headline here that the EU is preparing, 72 billion, in, counter tariff, 72 billion euros. So it is that,
What's that in English?
yeah, and, and counter tariffs on U.S. imports. But that would actually be lower than, I don't know. Anyway, headlines be headlining.
Yeah.
Over into Russia, speaking of headlines, and speaking of the NATO and the trade deficits and the this, that, and the other thing, we have seen an interesting shift. Trump had kind of promised or floated that we would have a big announcement on Russia today. It does appear that announcement is the administration is preparing to, set Ukraine up with offensive weapons, which would be a pretty significant
Yeah,
shift in,
some of these missiles can reach as far as Moscow, it's the fact that they've been published. It's the fact that they've been publicly saying that and using Moscow as a measurement guide, which I think is something we don't often see.
Yeah. And so that would be something that would give me pause, especially after the Iran situation, if I were Putin, potentially. And so I think you're seeing, what could be an interesting shift. Now, this is probably something that is just going to call or try to call Putin's bluff to a certain extent, I would imagine. Does he kind of come off some of his most recent demands? And you did see, like last week, there was a meeting amongst, I think it was Kellogg and a Russian, high-ranking Russian official where they were like, well, we'll look at we'll look at approaching things a little bit
Yeah,
differently. And it's like, okay, in what regard? Like, what are you going to do differently? Because you've said this 77 times in the last 3 years or whatever. And it's always the same thing, just maybe with a word change slightly, like, Taylor's, remixes or redos on her albums. But,
yeah.
that's about it. It's the same exact thing, just a
One for the
slight
kids.
note difference. Yeah. Or the Swifties, that are listening in. But, that'll be something that we'll have to be paying attention to because that could be a pretty significant escalation in the whole entire region, I would imagine. And something that we really are going to have to watch because that's a sharp difference in, oh, hey, we're getting into peace. Not to mention, when talking about the Black Sea, we are seeing some issues pop up with production. We are hearing more in the way of less than stellar yields in parts of Russia due to that lack of rain. They didn't really have extreme heat by any means, but apparently they just didn't grab the rain enough to get the heads filled out like they'd like to see. We have seen some heat build into the forecast here, in both central and eastern Ukraine as well as Russia. And so not only are you dealing with the war factor and, Russia launching thousands of drones and hundreds of missiles, like, they're launching upwards of 500 drones a night and plus some missiles and some other things and attacking further west as they do it. It's not really, a great look. And so, yeah, we'll be watching
Yeah,
to see, what happens there, but it does look like we will be looking at an escalation in the region potentially before escalation to get to resolution, right? And so,
yeah. There we go.
we'll see what that looks like there, but that could have some pretty significant impacts on things. We'll also be watching weather. We are seeing some hints of, some heat, potentially building in like this morning. If you look at, and I'm not a weather person, I'm just looking at pictures of model maps on the, internet on agweather.com. So I'll be watching Eric Snodgrass's forecast here in a little bit. But the Euro AI, which has been one of the better performing, I believe, Nico will have to correct me if I'm wrong in this, but, it's been one of the better performing models there. It is calling for some heat to build in. In the meantime, though, conditions look decent. But like I was saying at the start, like it's not one of those things like corn yields don't work to where, okay, well, if you just keep getting more rain, you keep adding bushels, like eventually you hit a ceiling. And as a matter of fact, like if you get too much rain, you start to go backwards. And I know that that's a very complicated sort of thing. And a lot of people will hiss when you say it, like, oh no, rain just simply makes grain. And it does most of the time, 99% of the time for every acre that's bad, you get two that are benefiting. But it's definitely something that is, we're going to have to keep an eye on it. There's some reports of poorer pollination than what people were thinking. There was some, too much cloud cover during pollination in places. You had the smoke factor at play. There's some variability out there. And so it wouldn't surprise me in the least if we didn't start to walk back some of these ideas or maybe talk about how FSA data will be incorporated in August. But we'll see. Lots of growing season ahead of us, lots of things to be paying attention to, and we're by no means, I would say, out of the woods when it comes to overall supply versus demand, just simply because we're seeing a continuation of decent demand, probably some sandbagging too from, world end users as they had expected a huge whoosh of corn to be sold from the farmer or wheat or anything, products to be sold by the farmer that really hasn't shown up yet. So it'll be interesting. It'll be a good week, hopefully. Hopefully. It better be. I'm tired of this
Hopefully,
shit.
fingers crossed.
Yeah. So we'll see. Tomorrow, we'll see what the day brings.
Brilliant. Well, Angie, thank you so much. I'm glad you've had a splendid weekend with the Scrabble board, and you're back with us. Listeners, thank you as always for tuning in. We love you dearly, and yeah, we'll catch you all tomorrow. Much love.
Have a good one, guys.